Everyone thinks they can stay silent and avoid the consequences, Tolstoy once wrote. But the cost of silence is far heavier than the weight of words. The rain pelted the window, each drop echoing like a drumbeat of unrest across the city streets. In the dimly lit study, Tolstoy's pen scratched furiously against paper, the flicker of the candle casting shadows across his lined face. Outside, the world roared, protests, arguments, whispers of injustice. But inside, one man grappled with a truth too heavy for the timid. What happens when silence costs more than words? That question hung in the air like smoke, sharp and relentless. Around him, the passive masses continued their quiet obedience, their eyes turned away from injustice, choosing comfort over courage. But he would not turn away. He would not bow. In a society quick to look the other way, the hero's voice cut through the fog of fear, trembling but unyielding, exposing the cracks where arrogance and oppression thrived. The room seemed to hold its breath. Every choice, every hesitation carried the weight of countless lives left voiceless. And in that tension, the first spark of defiance ignited, one man refusing to let silence rule. The world outside had no idea that this storm of words was about to change everything. Tolstoy lived in a world of upheaval, but his lessons resonate louder than ever today. In boardrooms where corruption whispers quietly, in classrooms where injustice is ignored, in communities where prejudice festers in silence, the cost of staying quiet is staggering. History shows us the power of a single voice, a whistleblower exposing wrongdoing, an activist refusing to let oppression slide, a neighbor stepping in when no one else dares. Each act of courage becomes a ripple that challenges the complacency of the many. Today, our society faces the same crossroads. Social media erupts with hashtags and viral outrage when someone dares to speak, proving that words still carry weight, that courage still inspires. The hero who confronts injustice risks criticism, isolation, even danger. But the alternative, silence, allows arrogance, greed, and cruelty to thrive unchecked. There are moments when speaking up is not optional, it is essential. Tolstoy's wisdom reminds us that our silence has consequences, often far greater than the discomfort of raising our voice. 5 critical situations will test this truth, each demanding bravery in ways that can shape lives, reputations, even history itself. What would you risk to speak the truth when it matters most? The answers lie in the moments we choose not to look away. Tolstoy's words were not just for his time. They echo through every moment where courage meets complacency. Today, the world faces quiet battles every day. A government official bending rules in secret, a corporation exploiting workers behind closed doors, a friend suffering injustice while others turn away. In each instance, silence becomes complicity, and speaking up becomes an act of defiance that can shift the course of events. History is filled with examples: a lone journalist exposing corruption, a teacher standing against prejudice, a citizen rallying for change, moments where bravery turned fear into transformation. In our modern age, social media amplifies both courage and cowardice. A single voice can ignite movements, spark debate, and challenge entrenched power. Yet many still remain silent, paralyzed by fear of backlash, ridicule, or rejection. Tolstoy reminds us that silence is never harmless. There are 5 critical situations where staying quiet can cost more than words ever could. Moments that demand courage, moral clarity, and the strength to defy the easy path. These are the tests that separate the passive from the heroic, the indifferent from the inspired. What would you risk to speak the truth when it matters most? The answer may define not only your life, but the lives of those who cannot speak for themselves. Born into privilege, Tolstoy's early life was gilded yet restless. The grandeur of noble estates could not shield him from doubt, from the haunting question, "Am I living for myself or for the truth. Personal crises struck relentlessly: loss, disillusionment, and the emptiness of indulgence. He saw the world around him steeped in injustice, yet for a time he too considered silence, comfort, and detachment safer than confrontation. But the quiet of compliance could not quell the stirrings of conscience. Tolstoy's own words cut through the fog. It is not length of life, but depth of action that matters. Each experience, each failure, each sleepless night wrestling with moral choice pulled him toward a life of courage and clarity. He began to see that silence in the face of wrong was itself a betrayal, that words carried power, and that integrity demanded action. His awakening was neither sudden nor easy. Fear and hesitation shadowed every decision, yet he persisted, learning that courage is born from struggle, that speaking truth requires both heart and soul. And then came the moments that tested him, and us, like never before. 5 situations where silence was no longer an option, where the world demanded the voice of conscience to rise. In a city hall echoing with murmurs of corruption, officials whispered deals behind closed doors, each compromise bending the truth, each silence feeding injustice. Tolstoy's words rang in the hero's mind. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. Around him, colleagues nodded quietly, choosing comfort over confrontation, their silence a silent endorsement of wrongdoing. But he could not. Each lie, each hidden transaction, each muted protest weighed heavily on him, pressing against the boundaries of conscience. He stepped forward, voice steady yet charged with urgency, exposing the schemes that others feared to name. The room froze. Some avoided his gaze, shame painting their faces, while others seethed, threatened by the audacity of truth. The contrast was stark, the cowardice of the silent versus the courage of the one willing to speak, to risk reputation and safety for integrity. In that tense silence, the power of words became clear, the ripple effect undeniable. Every eye turned, every whispered doubt transformed into a moment of reckoning. And just as the echoes of this confrontation began to settle, a deeper challenge awaited. But what about when silence hurts those closest to you? In the dim alleyways of the city, whispers of fear and despair floated like smoke. Those without power, the marginalized, the silenced, cowered under the weight of threats and oppression. Tolstoy's words echoed sharply. Wrong does not cease to be wrong because the majority ignore it. The hero could not turn away. Every fiber of conscience demanded action. Every heartbeat called for courage. Stepping into the fray, he spoke for those who could not speak, his voice cutting through the shadows. Villainous forces lurked nearby, subtle yet menacing, trying to drown out truth with intimidation, bribery, and mockery. Yet with each word, each act of courage, the ripple spread. The vulnerable found strength, others were inspired, and even distant observers imagined audiences on social media, in cafes, in homes, began to echo his message, sharing, commenting, rising with him. Fear clawed at him, the moral dilemma sharp as a blade. But silence was no longer an option. The stakes were too high, the cost of inaction unbearable. Every whispered doubt, every tremor and hesitation was met with the clarity of purpose. And just as the first waves of hope began to take hold, a harsher truth loomed ahead. And when even friends stay quiet, what will you do? Deep in a grand hall lined with portraits of authority and tradition, the elite gathered, their whispers thick with influence and expectation. Tolstoy's voice echoed in the hero's mind. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. Here, silence was the easy path, conformity the shield, but the stakes demanded more than caution. Calm, Composed and unwavering, he stood before those in power, articulating truths they preferred to ignore. Each word cut through layers of pretense, exposing hypocrisy and challenging the very norms that upheld injustice. Murmurs turned to gasps, gossip rippled through corridors, and the media, sensing the upheaval, amplified every phrase. Social feeds lit up with support, outrage, and debate, validating the hero's courage even as adversaries fumed. The tension was palpable. One misstep could silence him, one hesitation could undo the ripple he had ignited. Yet he held steady, proving that moral clarity and courage could confront even the most entrenched authority. And as the crowd absorbed his defiance, the room held its breath, knowing the cost of cowardice and the weight of conscience. But silence can also betray your own soul. Deep in the quiet chambers of private dealings, temptation lingered like smoke, promises of gain, shortcuts, and applause for compliance. Staying silent was easy. It offered safety, comfort, and approval. Yet Tolstoy's words thundered in the hero's mind. Wrong does not cease to be wrong because it is ignored. The choice was clear: bow to convenience or uphold integrity. He chose the latter. Calm and composed, he refused to compromise, articulating his stance with a dignity that silenced whispers of scorn. The contrast was stark. Villains of fear and arrogance tried to coerce him into submission, yet their pressure only illuminated his moral clarity. Every pause, every measured word reinforced that courage is as much about restraint as it is about action. The ripple effect was immediate. Imagined audiences, friends, colleagues, social media followers felt the weight of his resolve. Admiration, awe, and validation surged invisibly yet powerfully, affirming that integrity commands respect even when it challenges comfort. In that moment, he realized that courage is often quieter, subtler, but no less potent than public heroics. Every silent compromise avoided could corrode the soul. And sometimes, the hardest truth is the one spoken to yourself. The city square filled with expectant faces, the air thick with anticipation. One voice, unwavering and clear, rose above the murmurs, speaking not just for himself, but for countless others who had no platform, no advocate. Tolstoy's words resonated. The most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. Each sentence ignited courage in those listening. Each pause allowed reflection. Each story seeded hope. Crowds swelled, inspired by the hero's moral clarity. Conversations erupted in cafes, homes, and online feeds. Hashtags trended, echoing the message across social media, creating ripples far beyond the square. The oppressed found courage, the hesitant found conviction, and the indifferent began to notice. His words were more than rhetoric. They were a call to action, a blueprint for integrity, a spark lighting fires in hearts around the world. The hero's impact was tangible, yet delicate. Each word carried responsibility. Each truth spoken demanded vigilance, for inspiration without follow-through risks fading into empty applause. The emotional crescendo hit as the audience, both present and virtual, realized that one voice, grounded in courage and conscience, could awaken a movement. And yet, the real challenge is not just to speak, but to live it every day. Deep echoes of courage reverberated far beyond the moments of confrontation. Those who had remained silent felt the weight of their inaction, whispers of regret threading through offices, homes, and social feeds. The hero, by contrast, earned recognition, respect, and admiration, not without resistance, as critics and detractors scrambled to challenge, diminish, or discredit him, but his moral clarity could not be undone. Tolstoy's words lingered. Action is the seed of change. Hesitation is the soil where injustice grows. Social and political ripples multiplied. Conversations sparked in parliament, in cafes, in living rooms. Viral threads celebrated the courage of one who dared to speak. Communities felt empowered, inspired to act in small and large ways, proving that one voice can catalyze movements, shift perceptions, and challenge entrenched power. The emotional impact was undeniable. People realized that integrity carries weight, that courage inspires more courage, and that silence, once comfortable, can haunt. The world had shifted, not by force, but by conviction, by truth spoken even when inconvenient, even when risky. Each ripple invited reflection, challenging audiences to ask themselves who they would be when faced with the same choice. All this leads to a truth more profound than any debate. Tolstoy's life teaches a truth that transcends time. Dignity, courage, and unwavering commitment to truth can outshine fear, oppression, and silence. The hero we have followed, through moments of hesitation, moral conflict, and societal pressure, stands as a beacon, showing that one person's voice, grounded in integrity, can inspire a movement. It is not in the loudest shout, but in the quiet conviction of the soul that change begins, Tolstoy reminded us. Cinematic in its resonance, the story crescendos as the hero's words ripple outward into city streets, online communities, classrooms, and homes, igniting courage, stirring reflection, and challenging indifference. Courage is not merely defiance, it is the choice to uphold justice, to protect the vulnerable, to speak truth when it is hardest, and to inspire others to follow. Integrity becomes contagious, moral clarity infectious. The audience witnesses not just a story, but a mirror to their own potential. Each moment invites reflection. When silence tempts, will you act? When fear presses, will you speak? When injustice persists, will you rise? Tolstoy's lesson is both personal and universal. The price of silence is great, but the power of a courageous voice is boundless, capable of transforming lives, communities, and the world itself. This is the call to action. Embrace courage, live your truth, and let your voice echo beyond the silence. We've journeyed through the lessons of Tolstoy, witnessing the power of one voice rising against injustice, oppression, and indifference. Each situation revealed a truth that demands attention. Never be silent in these 5 situations. Whether standing against wrongdoing, defending the vulnerable, speaking to power, protecting your integrity, or inspiring others, courage is not optional. It is essential. The world waits for those willing to act, to speak, and to embody the values of dignity, justice, and truth. Every choice to raise your voice creates ripples, reaching beyond yourself, touching lives, communities, and even generations. Tolstoy's wisdom reminds us that silence carries a cost far greater than the discomfort of confrontation, and that every act of courage, no matter how small, has the power to transform. So reflect on your own life. Which moments demand your voice? Where will you refuse to stay quiet? Engage with this story, share it, discuss it, inspire others with the courage you hold. Subscribe to Stay Connected with stories that challenge, motivate, and illuminate the paths of bravery and integrity. Your voice matters. Will you use it?